Hi, today I'm going to be showing you some simple mixed media techniques that will help you if you're working with collage. If you want to try out all these techniques, you'll need a pencil, packing tape, sandpaper, tracing paper, and some letters that you might want to copy, like some fonts that you like, okay? And also some collage papers that you might want to collage with can be helpful. So the first thing that I'm going to show you is how to get text onto your surface. So this is the surface that I'm going to be working on, and you can be working on any sort of surface. You might have done a watercolor painting and you want to add text to it. If you're confident drawing it right on, that's great. You can go right ahead and do that. I would recommend, of course, using a ruler. Another thing that you might want to do if you don't feel confident in getting the font, you want it just a certain way, is you can use a tracing paper transfer. So let's say I'm going to look at this, take this book. I like some of the fonts on here. So let's say I don't feel confident drawing this letter Y or the font in this style. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take a piece of tracing paper, place it over here, and I'm going to carefully trace the letter. Now, if you wanted a different size than what you have, you could always use the photocopier. If you're at school, you can make a photocopy and adjust the size. If the font is something you found online, of course, you can print it off in a different size. All right, I'll just do the simple version. I'm not going to add these little stripes. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this, my letter Y, I'm going to flip it upside down. So the back of the paper, I'm going to move this away for a second. I'm on the back of the tracing paper, and I'm going to shade. Now, you might be concerned that you will no longer see the Y, but you'll see when I flip it over, you'll still be able to see the Y. All right, so we have the Y here. And then I'm going to place it on the page, the place where I would like it to be, and simply trace. Now, depending on the surface that you are tracing this onto, or transferring this onto, I should say, sometimes it's a little bit hard for it to show up, and you might need to use an alternate, like an oil pastel on the back can work. But if you have, as long as the surface is not too dark, pencil should work. Okay, and because there is pencil on the back of this tracing paper, it should transfer, no problem. So we've got that letter there, and then I could trace that with Sharpie if I wanted to. All right, so there's one way we can get our the fonts the way we want them. Another thing that you can do, which is kind of a fun technique, is something called a packing tape transfer. I'll show you the finished product, and then I'll show you how to do this. So you can see I have these letters, and it's almost like they're printed on a transparency. I actually took these letters, and you can do this from a magazine or from a laser printer. It will not work from an inkjet printer. And we can actually get the ink to stick to a piece of packing tape. So that way, it's pretty cool. Then I can see right through it to the color of my background. So whatever sort of background I wanted to put them on, for example, I can see that background right through it and see the font. So that's kind of a really cool option. Okay, so how do I do that? What you're going to do, I printed out, once again, with a laser printer, not inkjet. It will not work with inkjet. Any of the ones that we have at school, well, I have a laser printer, and also if you make a photocopy at school, in the office or in the library, those will all be laser, so those will work fine. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab some text. Well, it's not really text, it's just some fonts, like so. Just cut it out. And like I said, this actually works with a magazine as well. So we can do this with a magazine image, but we'll start with these letters. I'm going to take my packing tape, pull out like so. And then I want my packing tape to go on top of the letters. Okay. And then I'm just going to trim this excess tape off because that's just going to be annoying. Kind of be a sticky mess. We don't need any of that. All right. So get rid of all that tape. So I now have my letters on a piece of paper and then with a piece of tape on top of them. The next thing you're going to need to do is I like to use these tools. We have them in class. It's called a bone folder. Strangely, it's actually made out of bone. It's used for bookmaking. But I'm sure you can come up with some other, you can really use anything to press. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to press the tape into the letters because ultimately I want the ink from the letters to stick to the tape. So this, for me, works well. But anyway, you want to press it should suffice. Okay, so if you were wondering what that sandpaper is for, what you're going to do with the sandpaper is you are going to rough up the back of this. Okay, that's going to let water get in there a little bit more easily. Then you are going to take a sponge, a wet sponge, and wet this whole surface. Or you can actually just take this over to the sink and put the whole thing under the sink. And then you use your fingers to rub away the paper. Okay? Once you have rubbed away the paper, it will look like my example here, which looks like it just got a little paper stuck to it, which is actually a good example. If you want some paper to stay stuck to it, you can, which is going to give you a different look than if you get all the paper cleaned up. So once you have rubbed off with your finger, like so, all of the paper, the wet paper that you want to get off, then I can just take this and I can go ahead and use, a glue stick is going to be great for collage. It's really all you need. I'm going to take my glue stick and apply glue to the whole surface. And I recommend actually having a scrap piece of paper in general when you're collaging. It's going to keep everything cleaner. The scrap paper, I can place my item on my scrap paper. That way I'm not getting glue all over my final product. Okay, and then I can glue this down. Another tip for collage is we want things to be flat. So scrap paper is very useful. You can take your scrap paper, place it over, and then use this bone folder if you're in school or even just fingers, but you want to press and flatten from the center outward, and that's going to give you a nice flat collaged item. Okay. So get that technique. I mentioned to you before that you could also use this same technique for something that comes from a magazine. So I'll just show you a piece that I made. This was a little bit of sky. I'll put it over white paper so you can see it. It was a little piece of sky, like clouds from a magazine. And I used that exact same technique of putting the tape on and then basically washing away the paper. So what's left is just anything that was white that had no ink washes away, and anything that has ink, it sticks. So it doesn't really show up too much on a white piece of paper, but if I were to put this sky on, well, I'm just going to put it on this for sake. If I were to put it on another surface, you can sort of see whatever the surface is going to shine through those white spots. Okay, on the blue, you won't see much of anything, but it kind of changes it a little bit. Okay, so you can do that with magazine pieces as well. I'm going to show you one more thing, and I'm also going to be using tracing paper again. So sometimes in collage, you might want to sort of mute certain things and emphasize other things. So one nice way to mute things is actually using tracing paper again. So you can see tracing paper, if we put tracing paper over something, it's going to de-emphasize it. So this F that is not covered by tracing paper obviously really stands out, and the rest sort of blends in. So I'm gonna go ahead and apply that piece of tracing paper. This could be useful. Let's say you were doing a project on depression and you wanted the face to sort of be muted and not stand out, not be bright. Maybe you cover it with tracing paper. Okay. So I want you to notice when I'm applying the glue, I'm putting glue on every part. This will start to curl up, which is kind of annoying. I'm going to just hold it with my fingers. Once again, I'm on my scrap paper, and you might need multiple scrap papers because your scrap paper will get gluey. And then I can place this down, and it will have the tendency, it's going to want to wrinkle. So I'm going to take my scrap paper, place it on top, my clean scrap paper, hopefully. And then I'm going to use my bone folder, or you can use fingers, and I'm pressing it out in every direction. And that should hopefully get me a pretty flat piece of tracing paper. Now, there's a little bit of moisture in this paper, so if I want to make this even flatter, what you would want to do is grab fresh pieces of scrap paper, place it on top, and then stick it in a heavy book. The piece of paper on top will absorb some of the moisture and help to flatten this. So that's a great technique if you really would like your collages to be like really properly flat. One other thing I'll just mention is you might want to, if you want to get an image on here, you always can do the tracing paper transfer. If you have something really large that you want to trace, the projector is a great option. So we can project things on from the computer. You can put your paper up on the screen and or up on the whiteboard, and you can trace from there. So those are great ways to get an image from an image onto your project if you're not hand drawing it. All right. Thanks for listening.